Good morning and welcome. I'm Jay Goodliff, Chair of the Department of Political Science. We are happy to see you here and your enthusiasm for learning about statesmanship in politics. We see a lot of people standing up in the aisles and in the back, and we have an overflow room today so that you can go and sit down and watch and still submit your questions. That's in 270 of the Kimball Tower. It's just on the other side here. So we encourage you, rather than having a fire hazard, for you to go over to 270 and watch the lecture from there and submit your questions from there as well. You can see up here, there's a place to submit your questions. This lecture is sponsored by the Department of Political Science and the College of Family, Home, and Social Sciences. It is also co-sponsored by the Wheatley Institute and the George W. Romney Institute of Public Service and Ethics in the Marriott School of Business. We appreciate the extensive preparations of our college event staff, our communications staff, and IT staff that make this event possible. Thank you. We recognize our Dean, Laura Padilla-Walker, here attending, and we recognize members of the Romney family, friends and family of the Romneys that are attending with us today. Senator Romney has already spent the last 2 days on campus giving lectures and visiting classes. On Tuesday, he shared his experiences on turning around the 2002 Olympic Winter Games. Last night, he gave the campus advice on public service. Today, we turn our attention to statesmanship. We will start with a prayer by Annie Walker, a political science major from Orange County, California, and president of the BYU Political Affairs Society, our department's student organization. Annie?
Our dear Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the opportunity that it is to gather together today in the spirit of education and community. We thank Thee for the blessing of dialogue and for the opportunity that it is to hear from Senator Romney today. Father, we thank Thee for the freedoms that we enjoy and for the privilege that it is to receive an education that we may go forward to bless and serve others. Father, we ask Thy Spirit to be with us on this day, that we may listen with open hearts and go forward with discerning minds. We ask that as we leave this room today, we will be inspired by a further commitment of doing good. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Annie. After Senator Romney's address, if you wish to ask a question, please use the QR code here and also that's been passed around as you came in. Mitt Romney launched his many careers as a graduate from BYU. After graduate school, he worked in management consulting and private equity and then led the 2002 Salt Lake Organizing Committee for the Winter Olympics, turning the struggling games into a success story. But today, we are particularly interested in Mitt Romney's political career. He was the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in Massachusetts before leading Utah's Olympics. After the Olympics, he was the governor of Massachusetts, where his accomplishments included pioneering a landmark healthcare law responsible for ensuring millions of residents. In 2012, he was the Republican nominee for President of the United States. In 2018, Mitt Romney was elected U.S. Senator from Utah. As senator, Romney was a leading voice for fiscal discipline, climate action, America's role in the world, and the need for a comprehensive U.S. strategy to counter China's ascendance. He played a key role in historic bipartisan legislation on improving the nation's physical infrastructure, emergency COVID relief, marriage equality with religious liberty protections, and gun safety. He received the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award in 2021 for, quote, his defense of democracy and the rule of law. Mitt Romney has been married to his wife, Ann, for 55 years, and together they have 5 sons, 25 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. As senator, he has been a great friend to BYU, welcoming and addressing our students at Washington Seminar and beyond BYU, and employing our students as interns and staff in his office. Please join me in welcoming Senator Mitt Romney.
Good to see you this morning. Appreciate the attendance, and hopefully I'll have something that you can remember. I brought a grandson with me. You noticed him coming down the aisle with me. He had the cane and is struggling to get down. He took leave of his senses and went paragliding. That did not end terribly well, but he's recovering after how many weeks in the hospital? 2.5 months in the hospital, and a lot of hardware. By the way, if you're interested in dating Nick, just get in touch with me and we'll make sure and arrange that. I was asked to talk about statesmanship, and like you, I went on ChatGPT and said, how do you define statesmanship? And read what they said. But I want to step back and just talk for a minute about some lessons I learned in my career. And as Jay indicated, my career didn't follow a normal path. When I was where you are, I had no idea what I wanted to do other than what I'd seen my dad do. So I thought I'd go work for a big company like he had. And then I spent one summer working for a big company, and I hated it. We worked on stupid stuff, and I didn't have any impact, and I figured that if I worked there maybe 30 or 40 years, I might be able to meet the CEO and have some impact. This was Chrysler Corporation. And I said, I don't want to do that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So the job I took was in consulting, because that's really not a decision at all. That's just sort of like I'll do whatever comes across the transom. And I did that for almost 10 years. And then got involved in buying companies. My boss in the consulting firm and one of my clients said, if you really want to make a difference, why buy a business and make it better? And this was a time, and this still is the time, you can buy a business without any money, which is a wonderful thing, which is you get other people's money. You get other people's money, some equity, and then you have to go to the bank to get some of their money, and then you have to get investors in something called mezzanine, which is a layer of debt with a very high interest rate. And that's another group of investors. You get all their money, and then you go out and buy something. And we bought a business, and then another, and many of them were losing money when we bought them. We thought we would be good at turning them around, and did. But that was a big part of my career. And then came to the Olympics, and then got involved in government and public service. And so I've been in different areas, and I've learned lessons from that, but one of the lessons that was most powerful to me was seeing how people interact in a setting like a corporation or the Olympics or whatever, and seeing the kind of enmity that oftentimes exists, and the competition that goes on, and the backstabbing and so forth. And there was a time when I was at Bain & Company, the consulting firm, when that was particularly acute, and my boss, Bill Bain, said, we got to tone this down somehow. All right, this is just too much anger and competition going on. And so we brought in 2 psychologists, and we'd break up in small groups. We had about 8 of us in a small group. And the psychologist began by saying, if you live your life in a way that's consistent with your core values, you'll be happy and probably healthy. If, on the other hand, you live in a way that's inconsistent with your core values, you'll likely have a lot of anxiety, not be happy or fulfilled, and probably you're going to get health problems, heart problems, and so forth later in life. At which point, one in the group said, well, how do we know what our core values are? And he said, well, write down the names of 5 people who have ever lived who you most admire. And we didn't have a lot of time, but I began by writing down Jesus Christ, and then I did Joseph Smith, and then I thought, okay, let's get outside the world of religion. I put down Abraham Lincoln, and then I put down my dad and my wife. And so those are the 5 names. He said, all right, next to those 5 names, write 3 qualities that you associate with each one of them. So I wrote that down. So that's 5 people times 3 qualities each, 15 different qualities. He said, now, circle all those that appear multiple times, 2 or 3 times. And I circled those. He said, now read them. And it was love, service, and integrity. And what was interesting is the 8 of us had all circled the same things: love, service, integrity, or similar things, character, courage. It was basically those same. He said, those are your core values. And if you live in a way consistent with those things, your life will feel good, and you'll be happy and healthy. What I've found is that there are many people who don't understand that, of course, and find themselves in conflict with one another and with their own values and are unhappy as a result of that. You might be surprised to know that the place where the unhappiness and the lack of consistency or integrity between values and action was the greatest was in the private sector. All right, you might think, oh no, it must be in politics. No, actually in politics, I was surprised that political people, they battle each other on TV, but when the cameras are off, they get along pretty darn well. I mean, I went to the Senate. I thought, oh, we Republicans are not going to talk to the Democrats. We hung out with the Democrats all the time, went to dinner together. Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, he came to Washington, D.C. and wanted to get a condo to live in, but the condos cost like $2 million. And he's like, holy cow. He was looking in the paper and he saw a houseboat for sale for $250,000. So he bought the houseboat. He put AstroTurf on the top deck of the houseboat, and we go there for dinner all the time. He'd have equal Republicans and Democrats. He'd get lasagna from a local restaurant, and we'd go there and sit around and have great chats. Now, when the cameras turned on, we were like, oh, the Democrats are terrible. They're doing, and we got along great. One of the things I saw that actually I think turns out to be true is if there are two males who are really close friends, they will attack one another with insults and laugh, and it's a big part of being a close friend, which is feeling close enough to another guy to insult him. Girls tend not to do that so much, all right? Which is, if you're, I mean, my wife tells me she would never think of saying the things to her friends that I say to my close friends. And I mean, one of my good friends is a guy in Salt Lake named Kem Gardner. Every time I see him, I think about a new joke, a new way to go after him, and he does the same for me. And when the phone rings, hey, ferret face, how you doing? And so that was true in the Senate. A couple of my favorite stories in that regard were, one, the senator from Louisiana, John Kennedy, was trying to insult the senator from Mississippi. And he stood up at lunch, John Kennedy did, he says, oh, I understand that the drinking age in Mississippi has been raised to 40 years old. We all look, he says, that's to keep alcohol out of the high school, So this takes a second, but one of my other favorites was Mitch McConnell said, Ted Cruz came to me and said he hates Obamacare so much, he'd lay in a railroad track to stop it. Said, the more I thought about it, the more I thought that was a good idea. So these things go on. We get a big laugh out from one another, and the collegiality was pretty extraordinary. Now I want to talk about core values, if you will, and how you're going to live your life, and then draw in the concept of statesmanship from a political and non-political standpoint. I would note that there are sort of two parts of many of us. One part is, if you will, a selfish, personal, how can I be happy, what makes me feel great about myself, that part of me, which is the me part. Then there's another part, which is what can I do for others, or for an institution, or for a church, or for a school, or for my country. And there are those two parts. And growing up, little folks, we're entirely devoted to ourselves. You're not thinking about what's right for the family or what's right for the other kids in Sunday school, junior Sunday school, or what. That's not part of the psyche. And as you get older, you begin thinking about some of those other things as well. And one of the unusual aspects about the gospel of Jesus Christ was that the Savior said things that seemed wrong, almost oxymorons. He'd say, to find yourself, you have to lose yourself. And it's like, wait, well, that doesn't make sense. But in fact, time and again, that's, I think, the experiences of life, which is, if you really want to have the happiness as an individual, you have to step away from that and focus more on the part of your life which is service to others. And so what I have found in my business career is that we were most successful when we stopped worrying about how much money we were going to get for ourselves and whether we were going to get promoted, and more interested in how well are we going to do for the people that we're working for, our clients, if you will. In the investment business that I was in, we said, let's not worry about how much money we're going to make. Let's worry about how much our investors are going to do, how they're going to do well. And if they do really well, we'll probably do well as well. So focus on them and getting them happy with what we've done for them. Don't focus on ourselves. That principle was brought home in a very powerful way for me at the Olympics in 2002, that was my most enjoyable of my private sector, or I should say my career opportunities. The Olympic experience, where I came to Utah for 3 years to help organize the Olympic Winter Games. And we had about 2,000 employees. It's a big operation to put together an Olympics. We had about 2,000 people. And one quality and characteristic of that job is that we all knew as soon as the Olympics were over, all of us were fired. There's no continuing job. The Olympics are finished, job done, gone. And that's an amazing psychological event, because what it meant was no one was interested in spending time worried about who was getting promoted. Promoted to what? Unemployment. All right. So, and likewise, no one was saying, "Oh, how do I make more money?" It's like that's irrelevant. You knew what you're going to make when you got hired. You make that, and then we go. We were concentrated on doing one thing: putting on the best Olympics possible. And everybody in the team, the 2,000, it's like if someone isn't doing well, it's like people rush to help them. It's not like they were saying, "Oh, they're not doing well. I'm going to let people know, oh, they're doing a lousy job. Maybe I can get that job." No. If someone's doing poorly, I got to help them. We all ran to help people whose area of expertise was in trouble. We had the speed skating oval, for instance, collapsed. All right, an engineering firm that had done the engineering, a very good firm, miscalculated the scale of the bolts necessary to hold the cables that held the roof up on the speed skating oval. And after it was about 3/4 of the way finished, the cable snapped and boom, 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 all the cables then snapped and the whole roof came down. No one pointed fingers and said, who's to blame? We all said, okay, how are we going to get this thing back up in time for first the World Cup and then the Olympics that came thereafter? Now, in the world of government, you have people likewise drawn by two things. One is their personal interests, and the other is their commitment to something greater and more important: the country, the state, the things they believe in. And you will find people in political life who are so devoted to the former that they only pretend to have interest in the latter. And then you will find people who are called statesmen, and that's meant to be gender neutral, but doesn't sound like it, but it's gender neutral, and that there are women statesmen and men statesmen. In my experience, people in elected office are not overwhelmingly statesmen. The reason that John F. Kennedy established the award that he did, and to acknowledge people who were statesmen, was that it was not a particularly uniform quality that he experienced in D.C. And what I found when I was there was likewise that was not a quality which was ubiquitous. I've mentioned in a couple of addresses I've made so far that on campus that one of the first events I attended was a Wednesday prayer breakfast. And we had prayer breakfasts as senators every Wednesday morning, and about half Republican, half Democrats. About 20 of us showed up. And on one occasion, one of the senior senators someone I respect enormously, was describing how we decide how to vote on a particular piece of legislation. And it's just a throwaway line. He said, of course, we go through the 7 qualities that determine our vote. Number 1, will it help me get reelected? Number 2, will it keep my party in power in Washington? Number 3, is it good for my state? And number 7, is it good for the country? And I thought, what? Let's go through that again. Number 1, is it going to get me reelected? And number 7, is it good for the country? I mean, and that was shocking and revealing, and I looked around the room and no one else was particularly stunned by that analysis. Because I'm afraid in many cases that really is the calculation that people who have reached a very high level in political life follow. And I was able to find, in my experience in Washington, there were a number of people who did not follow that, who instead had gone to Washington, D.C. out of a desire to make a difference for the people that they served, the country or their state. And they would put their personal interests to the side and would favor the one over the other. I mentioned in a couple of addresses the person who I thought was the smartest person in the United States Senate when I was there, Kyrsten Sinema. Kyrsten is the senator, or was, from Arizona. She graduated from BYU, I think, at age 19. She's very smart. And she grew up in an LDS home. She's not practicing in our faith right now, but she was in a particularly difficult position. And that is because her party had the majority in the United States Senate and in the House, and they had Joe Biden in the White House. So they had the 3 major power sources, the House, the Senate, and the White House. And they wanted to do some things legislatively, and they were only held up by one thing. In the Senate, having the majority is not enough to get what you want. You have to get 60 votes. It's called the filibuster rule. There's no, by the way, we don't filibuster. We don't get up and give speeches. That's a nice term, but we don't do that. 60 votes is the filibuster rule. So you have to get 60 votes. So that means that the Democrats couldn't do some things they wanted to do. In my opinion, that anachronism, the 60-vote rule, is something which is essential to the functioning of our democracy and our economy. How can that possibly be? Let me explain. If one party, by a simple majority, can do whatever they want, then one party is going to make sure they keep that power forever. They're going to make sure the other party never gets in a majority to do that. So how would the Democrats, for instance, if they were able to get that power in this case and get rid of the 60-vote rule, they could get rid of the rule all by themselves. Isn't that a strange thing? It only takes 51 votes to change the rule, that you don't need 60 for everything else. So how would they keep the power forever? Well, by naming 2 new states. The District of Columbia, which would be solidly Democrat in voting, would elect 2 Democrat senators. Puerto Rico, likewise, would be solidly Democrat. Maybe they divide California into 2 states, get another 2 senators. Suddenly you have 6 new Democrat senators, all right? They'd also put in place, and they talked about this, putting many more people on the Supreme Court. Get many more, because they wouldn't have to have votes of any, put more Democrats on the Supreme Court to make sure the court wouldn't stop them from doing whatever they wanted to do. That's what they wanted to do. And you had President Biden saying, we have to get this power. You had the Democrat Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer, saying, we have to get this power. We've got to get rid of the 60-vote rule. You had the House of Representatives saying, Senate, get rid of that rule. And it took one person to say, no, that's wrong. And by the way, let me tell you one other reason why you want the 60-vote rule. If the Republican Party, like right now, got rid of the 60-vote rule. By the way, that's what President Trump wants. At any time, whenever you're in power, you want to have all the power, all right? So he wants that, just like Joe Biden did. If we Republicans were in charge and didn't have to worry about getting any Democrat votes, then we'd probably do some things that Democrats might not like. We might lower taxes dramatically on very wealthy people. We might put even bigger tariffs on some. We might decide that it's illegal to be in a union if you work for the government. All right? We actually might make it hard to be in unions at all. We might get rid of unions. I mean, they're all the things that our base would insist on from us would be pretty draconian. But then when the Democrats got in charge, if they ever got the power back, think of all the things they would do. They'd switch all that around. They'd raise taxes like crazy, give out all sorts of new money. We would go from guardrail to guardrail as a country. And families wouldn't be able to plan. They wouldn't know whether Social Security was going to be there, what their taxes were going to be. Corporations couldn't invest because they wouldn't know what their prospects were going to be. So the fact that we have this 60-vote rule means that policy has to be acceptable to both parties or to at least 10 people in the minority party. So that's why the rule is so important. I'm telling this long story because Kyrsten Sinema was the person that was going to decide whether the Democrats got unilateral power. And the White House had her come in and see the president. Chuck Schumer was talking to her, and she had said, I'm not going to vote in favor of the changing of the rule. And my colleagues in the Republican caucus said to me, Mitt, you know Kyrsten well, BYU grad. You know Kyrsten well. Can you see whether she could hold out, and or whether she's going to have to succumb to the pressure? And so I saw Kyrsten on the floor. I said, are you going to stick to that statement you made? I mean, regardless of the pressure that comes, that you're not going to vote to get rid of the 60-vote rule? And she said, Mitt, you know better than to ask me a question like that. I was raised Mormon. I've got Mormon principles. I'm not going to walk away from the things I believe. Of course I'm going to stick by my principles, which she did. She was the Democrat that voted no. Joe Manchin followed her and also voted no. And as a result, we have a system that continues to work, at least for now. So extraordinary political courage to do what she believed, and I happen to agree with her, is right for the country, and put aside her personal interest. By the way, she knew by voting that way that she would never be able to run as a Democrat again. All right, she would be primaried in her state of Arizona. Her approval rating in Arizona among Democrats went from like 90% to single digits with her vote. It's like, okay, and so as soon as her term was over, she resigned from the Senate. So her career, she had planned on being in the Senate. I mean, she'd been at the House, worked her way up, and then she ran for Senate, and she won, and she came to Washington as a senator, was a highly effective senator, in my view, the most effective in getting things done of our colleagues, and basically knew that by sticking to her principle, she would lose that job, which she did. And I saw that from time to time. So the question kind of is, what are you going to do? All right? What are your core values? And what are you willing to sacrifice to live in accordance with those core values? I wish I could say that throughout my life, I always stuck entirely to the things I believe most deeply and never varied based on principle or based on expediency. But what I found is, in human life, or in the human mind, we have an extraordinary capacity to rationalize and justify what is in our self-interest as being actually the best thing for the country, all right? We're able to convince ourselves that that's the case. So just evidence of that. When it came time to, for instance, impeach a president, all right, and to vote guilty or not guilty, all the people in one party vote no, all the people on the other party vote yes. It's like, well, how can a jury be divided entirely based upon political party? In the history of the country, until very recently, into the history of the country, there'd never been a case where members of one party voted to convict a president of the same party. It's like, wow, that's a lot of self-interest playing a role. Now, I'm sure almost every single one of the people who voted with their party were convinced that they were doing the right thing. that their party was right. And it was right. But I just note that throughout your life, you will find, as I have, the capacity to justify what you want to do, what's in your best interest, as being the right thing. There was a French king, Louis XIV. He built Versailles. He's famous for having said, "L'État c'est moi," the state is me. He actually probably didn't say that. That was a quote that came out 50 years after he died. But he did say something else. There was a conflict with a legislative body. The legislative body in France wanted to review all the edicts from the king to determine whether they should be operative or not, whether they were legal or not. And he appeared before, when he was a teenager, he appeared before this legislative body, and he said, well, I won't do it in French. I served a French mission. I won't show off any more than I already am. And he appeared before them, and he said, it is legal if I want it. It is legal if I want it. And from that came the later quote, "The state, it is me." And so there is, in the mind of many people, particularly in Washington, the view that if it's what I want, it must be right for the country. And you're going to find that in your own life, which is whether it's as a faculty member, an administrator, a church leader, a business person, a political person, there will be a natural tendency for you to say, if it's something that's really good for me, it's probably good for everybody else. And that may or may not be the case. Now, when I was, I'm going to stop here and turn to your questions, but when I was back in my consulting days as a brand new employee at Bain, my boss again, Bill Bain, said this. He said, "You'll make two important decisions in your life. Who will you marry and what will be your career?" And he missed actually the most important question. And President Nelson expressed just prior to his death the most important question. He said the most important question is, what's your life about? What's your purpose in life? What are you going to give yourself to? A play about Joan of Arc has her saying as she's about to be burned at the stake, people live their lives for whatever they believe in. Some people believe in little or nothing. But to live your life without belief, without purpose, will be worse than dying young. So, what's your purpose in life? If it's just to have fun and make more money and so forth, it's kind of be an empty life. And when it's all over, it won't feel real good. In my life, and by the way, your purpose in life will expand or change over time as you have different circumstances and different opportunities. But really, I began thinking about this after I got married, and my purpose in life was to make my spouse happy and raise a good family. I attended the temple of our church and made a commitment to help build the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that has become the purpose of my life. Now, and has been ever since. Now, when the opportunity came to become governor of a state, I took on a purpose of helping people in my state, making the state better for the people that had elected me. That was also a purpose. And when I ran for president and became a senator, my purpose expanded to help the people of the country and to get our country strong. And so your purpose may change based upon your circumstance, but I begin with, what is the purpose of my life? I would note that if your purpose is just to have fun or make a lot of money or become famous or get a promotion or win an election, you're bound to be unhappy because that's not in your control. There's a lot of luck and serendipity to life. There's a lot people who are wealthy and highly successful think it's all because of their brilliance. It's like, yeah, brilliance helps a lot, but it ain't enough. Luck has to be there too. And so if you define your life by how much money you make, I got bad news. It may or may not happen because it's not in your control. But if you define your life by the things you do control, by your purpose in life, by helping build the kingdom, by having a relationship with your spouse or your family and your friends, then your life is in your control. I actually believe the real currency in life is the people you love and the friends you have. And everything else is like, I've said this before, everything else is like a great game of Monopoly. All right, it's fun to play Monopoly. All right, I like playing Monopoly, and so your career and all that's going to be like Monopoly. You may get some hotels and some houses, but you know what? If you land on Park Place and your opponent has Park Place, you're going to lose. And it's like that's kind of luck. There's skill and luck are involved in the game of Monopoly. That's your career. Is like a game of Monopoly. There's more. You have more control than the game of Monopoly, but it's a good, perhaps a good metaphor. But the good news is that's just the game. What really counts is the stuff where luck doesn't play a role, which is your friends, the people you love, and your commitment to the gospel of Jesus Christ. So with that, I'm going to stop. I would note there are some extraordinary statesmen in our country and in government. We need more. We need statesmen who are students, statesmen who are faculty members, parents, leaders of corporations. We need people who will, from time to time, sacrifice what's in their personal best interest for what's in the interest of their core values. And with that, I'll turn back to you, Jay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Romney. We've received many questions. Thank you for submitting them. I'm going to try to combine some of these questions and for the ones that have the most topics that are similar. So the first question is going to be related to what you just had, which is from Ryan Mitchell. How can we develop statesmanship, the skill of statesmanship, as college students?
I think by being explicit and recognizing what is it that I want to accomplish, what's my purpose in life, and recognize that'll change over time. I didn't know what I wanted as a purpose in life. By the way, I never thought I'd get involved in politics. That only came much later in life. My dad said, he said to all four of us, don't get involved in politics unless you're independently wealthy and your kids are raised. I never thought I'd be independently wealthy. And because of good luck in some of the businesses I bought, I became independently wealthy. I mean, when I say good luck, we bought the Yellow Pages of Italy. You don't know what the Yellow Pages are. It used to be that when you wanted to find someone to come repair your roof, for instance, you got a book called the Yellow Pages. It was had yellow pages. And you turn the pages, you look at a roofing, and they had the roofing companies and their phone numbers. And they paid a fee to be in the book. And the Italian phone company was selling the Yellow Pages, and we bought it. What a terrible idea. With the internet company, the Yellow Pages are gone. You don't know what it is. Some old people here in the room are nodding their heads, but it's gone. We should have lost all of our money in buying the Yellow Pages of Italy. But in the contract, unbeknownst to me, and I'm the guy that runs this enterprise, in the contract, it said that the exclusive rights to the internet in Italy were owned by the Yellow Pages division. Yeah. We had the exclusive rights to the internet in Italy and didn't know about it, all right? So our investment went from being worth zero, being worth billions of dollars. And we cashed it in, all right? So there's nothing like good luck, all right? There's nothing like good luck. You will see how, as your life progresses, but understanding what is it that I really want to live for? What's important to me, really? And then saying, I want to make sure and watch my self-interest and keep it from having me do things that are in conflict with the things that are most important to me.
Thank you. This question comes from Everett Watterson. What can we do as ordinary citizens to help combat the polarization and political division that is so rampant in our country today?
I mentioned as well earlier that in another address here that Mike Leavitt, the former governor of Utah, 3-term governor and now president of the Tabernacle Choir, said, Mitt, you ought to read a book called Age of Acrimony. So I read this book, kind of boring, but it talked about 50 years in American history that I had never considered, which was the 50 years after the Civil War. And people were angry with each other. And politics was vicious. And there were a lot of political assassinations. A lot of people got killed or shot as part of political rallies. And actually, the campaign events were with people marching up and down streets with lighted torches, intimidating one another. And you could see how people voted. They gave you a colored ballot, and the voting was done in the open. They didn't have voting booths, so you could actually see how people voted. I mean, and somehow it ended. This enmity and division ended. And the author of the book doesn't explain how it ended. So I invited him to come into my office when I was a senator and explain what happened. And he said, well, I don't have a great answer except this. The young people of the rising generation said, enough. They said, we're not going to deal with that. We don't want that. And they insisted that it was over and didn't participate in it. It's amazing. He said somehow the people of the country rejected what was going on from the political leaders of the country and insisted on a degree of harmony and cooperation, which had not existed before. I'm actually convinced that by people around the country living by our core values, our better angels, if you will, in our nature, we can help heal the divide. Now, I also hope that we have a leader or two who steps forward and helps bring us together. Lincoln did that after the Civil War with his inaugural address in which he said, with malice toward none and charity for all, he helped bring us together. So you can do part of that, and hopefully someone will rise at a time we most desperately need them.
Well, we have a lot of questions as well about the Republican Party and the conservative movement generally, about how it's moved. This is a time where we see the right, conservatives, Republicans, there's some conflict with infighting there. Killian Jansen asks, what can be done to ensure conservatism doesn't fall victim to anti-Semitism, hate, and other dangerous ideologies?
Yeah, populism, by definition, is popular, all right? Hence the term, populism. And drawing on people's darker angels, as Abraham Lincoln spoke, actually gets a lot of attention and gets a lot of support. I mean, when we drive down the highway, if there's an accident, everybody slows down to get a good look. I mean, we're drawn to that stuff, all right? And so finding a scapegoat, particularly if your life hasn't worked out or isn't working out the way you thought it should, finding someone to blame is a very comforting thing to do. It feels terrific to be able to say, well, I didn't get this because those illegals came in here and took away my job, or this group or this ethnicity or that. And whether, by the way, those who are members of the same faith as me, there but for the grace of God go we with regards to the anti-Semitism. I mean, people are always out looking for a group to blame, all right? And so if you're any kind of group, that in any way seen as being different, you're subject to being pilloried. And that's what's going on. And that's happening on both sides of the aisle. On the Democrat side, you have the Democrat socialists whose view is, okay, it's these billionaires, and particularly the tech billionaires, that are ruining your life. And we've got to go after them and tax them and regulate them, and they're the problem. And they're evil. All right, they're evil. They're post-liberal. And then on the Republican side, why it's in some cases it's so far over, it's anti-Semitic, and and by the way, each side pointing at each other saying they're not just wrong, they're evil. Governor Cox has really distinguished himself as someone that's uniting people in the country. I mean, he says, look, we have to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. But nonetheless, there's extreme attention to populism in our society, which we haven't had in a long, long, long time. And in my view, it's dangerous. How's it going to unravel? I don't know the answer. I really don't know where it's going to go. There are some who predict it's going to get worse and we're going to become authoritarian, with one side grabbing all the power, one to the other. And there are others who think we'll get tired of the extremes and come back to the center. But we're certainly not there at this stage.
We have several questions about policy as well. So something that's on the recent agendas. It seems like This is from Dylan Lawson. It seems like government shutdowns have been more frequent recently. Is that going to continue? Why are these taking place, and how can we stop them?
Yeah, the reason they happen is they're good politics. All right, in this case, both parties thought a government shutdown was good for them politically. So it's going to happen. Now, why do I say that? My guess is the White House said, you know, a good shutdown is going to be helpful if there's an economic downturn in the future, which is not entirely in the White House's control, by the way. The president can't control the whole economy. He might think he can, but he can't. And if we have a downturn just before the midterms, if we had a big shutdown, we can say it was the Democrats that did it. That shutdown, it wasn't me, President Trump, it was them. It was them that caused it. So, yeah, a shutdown's kind of a good thing. Let the Democrats shut it down. On the Democrat side, they got to show their base that they're fighting. It's like, we can't just say, okay, Republicans, you can get what you want again. We got to show we're fighting. So they decided they were going to have to fight. So it was in both interests to have a shutdown. And the only people that suffered, of course, were the American people and the people who work for government. They're the ones who suffered, and suffered severely. Now, I know the conventional wisdom that you're hearing from the talking heads is that the Democrats caved, that Chuck Schumer, can you believe it, he just gave in. I don't actually see it that way, and I may be the only person who doesn't see it that way. I figured someone had to give, all right? And I don't think Donald Trump was ever going to give. I don't think, if we couldn't go home for Thanksgiving, he'd say, fine. It's like, let him suffer. We're going to win. His whole brand, his whole image is strength. There's no way he's going to fold. If I were Chuck Schumer, I'd have made that calculation at the beginning. That guy will not fold. He cannot fold because his whole brand is strength. If he folds and gives in to us, he will completely lose the support he has. So he can't. So you really want to go, what's the old expression? Do you want to get in a pissing match with a camel? No, not a good idea. And so it was a mistake. It was a mistake, on my part, for Chuck Schumer and the Democrats to choose a fight they could not win, and should have figured that out from the beginning. And they got to a point where they realized, okay, this is not working. It's not going to work. More and more people are going to suffer. And heaven forbid, if there's some tragedy, if there's an airline accident, for instance, because there are not enough air traffic controllers, the suffering is going to be extreme. And so they did what they had to do.
I think we have time for one more question, and we're going to move to foreign policy. You've talked about the ascendance of China and the worries that you have there. What would be one part, at least, of your strategic plan to address China? Here's a sad reality. You're gonna face the most turbulent time probably ever in America's history. Well, the Civil War would have been. Sorry. Almost, all right? The second most turbulent time. With China on a path to surpass us economically and militarily and geopolitically. With AI, I don't know what AI is going to do, but it has the potential of doing some wonderful things and some awful things. One thing I know it's doing is cutting back on job opportunities for people coming out of college. And there are going to be a lot of people unhappy about that. College graduates, particularly those that have racked up a lot of debt, assuming when they get out of college they're going to be able to get a good job. So that's happening. And the climate's changing. The Great Salt Lake is drying up. If it dries up completely, the economy of Utah Valley and Utah County and Salt Lake County will be devastated. People won't want to live here. Companies won't want to be here. Their employees won't want to come here. We got some real challenges that we face. And that's a good time for you guys because we rise to the occasion when there are challenges. But we got some real challenges. One is China. And just very briefly, we have sat back as political leaders so focused on this that we've let China get away with murder. We let China do things we're not allowed to do by our law. And the other Western countries do the same thing. So for instance, we're not allowed to have monopolies. China can have a monopoly, and they do. Monopolies are great.
You get a monopoly, and then you can hold everybody hostage, you can raise prices, you can drive them out of business because you've got something they have to have. You want to make a magnet? Guess what? China can determine whether you can make a magnet or not. You can't have a car if you can't get a magnet. You can't build computers without magnets. You can't build aircraft without magnets. And China monopolizes the ingredients and processing that allow you to make magnets. All right? And not only that, but you go industry after industry of the critical earths and the rare earths necessary for our industry, they're monopolized by China. All right? They've been doing that brilliantly. And what have we done about it? Nothing. All right? So I won't, the list goes on and on and on. What we need to do is develop a strategy with ourselves and our friends around the world so that we have economic power. The U.S. used to have unilateral power. Whatever we wanted, the world had to do. After the Second World War, we had 50% of the world's economy. Think about that. 5% or so of the population, 50% of the economy. That's dropped down to about 15% of the world economy. All right, so we don't have that kind of power anymore. We have to link arms with others and collectively say to China, no, you can't do that. And if you do, we will not allow your products into our country. All of us. Then they're going to have to start playing by the rules. We haven't done that. My strategy would be to get together with our allies and friends to develop the policies that China and the rest of us will live by. You guys, it's an exciting time to be alive. I wish I could take your place. I thought it would take longer to get old, but here I am. I got here faster than I thought. It's very strange to be as old people, but I am. And I'm excited about the future. I'd like to stay around and watch it all because I think you're going to have a thrilling ride, but it's a turbulent time. And in a time of turbulence, being a peacemaker, as President Nelson called for, is most desperately needed. And the need to define your life by things that are enduring and rewarding is as important as one can imagine. So with that, God bless, take care, love you guys. Thanks so much.